you're a fearful avoidant and you have ever asked yourself these questions and you've lived this painful reality, I hear you, I see you. And this isn't just about heartbreak. This is you finally getting what you wanted, finally feeling seen and chosen and safe enough to open up. But something inside you switched, you panicked, and you shut it down. This isn't about not loving the person enough. It's about capacity versus emotional exposure. When a relationship is consistent, emotionally intimate, stable, deeply connected, removes that protective distance, kept your nervous system feeling safe in the familiar. For many fearful avoidants, that familiar is chaos. That's what you want to be predictable. When things feel calm, it feels dangerous. Not because it's actually bad, but because that space, that quiet, opens up a whole world for you to be hurt, for you to lose it, be exposed. And that exposure is risky. When things start to feel really good, the fearful avoidance system picks up on that and reads it as this matters, this is important, this could devastate me if I lost it. So your avoidance side steps in to protect you. The system starts to look for exit points, flaws, all the ways that it's not going to work, creates physical or emotional distance. For many fearful avoidants, for your system to protect you, it creates rupture, picking fights, breaking up abruptly, becoming angry or cold, escalating things really quickly, not because you want out of the relationship, because your system is trying to reduce emotional risk exposure at any cost. Part of you is like, wow, I love it.
Thank you for joining us. And, we're talking tonight about something that I find fascinating personally. We're talking about fearful avoidance, otherwise known as disorganized attachment styles. Attachment styles, obviously, very much being talked about in social media right now. And everybody seems to maybe have a sense of what we're talking about when we're talking about secured individuals or individuals that maybe come from an anxious pattern or people that maybe come from an avoidant pattern. But I don't know that people always know or know how to recognize when there is a fearful avoidant pattern playing out. So maybe just to start us off, what is a fearful avoidant pattern?
A fearful avoidant is someone who grew up with an immense amount of emotional inconsistency. Typically, this stems from childhood, right? So there's either like a sense of inconsistency, or there's usually most fearful avoidants have some form of trauma. So it could have been a big event, and that also includes a loss, right? So like it could have been a really traumatic loss, or just a bunch of little traumas throughout. So a fearful avoidant is just that, right? There's the anxious and the avoidant sides of the attachment spectrum. And this is where you will oftentimes see this very contradictory behavior where this person is wired to really desperately crave closeness, but they're also simultaneously terrified of it at the same time. So it's this constant contradictory back and forth, but that's essentially what makes up a fearful avoidant. The pattern is, a lot of people will see that it's very hot and cold. 1 minute they're in, then the next minute they're not talking to you. And then it's like, it's constantly, it's oscillating between these two states.
First off, as far as labels, you are not a fearful avoidant. You are somebody that walks in fearful avoidant patterns. Is that the best way to talk about this?
Yeah, I think that that's a really great point to make, because even though people say it all the time, because it's, less words to say you're somebody with this attachment style, this is not who you are, right? Just like your attachment style isn't who you are. We all have an attachment style. It is simply a collection of adaptions, as well as, how we want to get our needs met, how we want to survive connection, how we want to maintain connection. And these are all learned patterns. And that's the whole point, is you can reteach them. It's not who you are, though. And a lot of people, though, like to take, not like to, but they tend to take on the identity of this is who I am. I've even had people tell me, this is just how I am, it's not going to change, because they've taken on the identity of it, when it really is just a series of patterns that can be rewired.
So you've been really public about your own experience and growing up with these patternings and these relationship skills. So tell us a little bit of who you are, what has made you and what has formed you, and what has been a part of your life, and how all of this made Rachel Smith who Rachel Smith is.
But yeah, so as you said, I'm now secure, but I had a fearful avoidant attachment style. So it's always going to be a part of me, though. That is my default architecture. You know, my parents were both very unhealed fearful avoidants as well.
Okay.
My dad was he was for years he was a drug addict, and he was an alcoholic when I was growing up as well. My mom was also a very reactive, really struggled to get support, really struggled to have a partnership. So my my mom was the main attachment figure in my life. My dad was there, but he wasn't really emotionally present. He was always kind of like, honestly, like he would just really try to avoid everything.
Right.
um, my parents were constantly arguing, and it would get very intense and very scary a lot of the time. And so, you know, I spent my entire childhood like I was afraid all the time. Like I was terrified of my parents because anytime I tried to open up, I was also a very emotional, very sensitive child,
Right.
which is very typical for fearful avoidance as well. But I was very emotional, and my parents did not know how to handle it,
Sure.
and they didn't understand me. And every time I tried to communicate, it would always get shut down, or it always, you know, there would always be so many consequences all the time. So it was like you were constantly walking on eggshells. And it was like you were just waiting. There's like this constant tension in your body because you were just waiting for something to happen. And it wasn't a question of if it was going to happen, it was just when.
When.
And so you could never really fully relax, and you could never really trust that your parents were going to support you. Actually, this is a perfect example. When I was 16, I was in a car accident.
Okay.
It was not my fault, by the way.
Mhm.
But I called my mom, and I was more terrified of calling my mom than I was of getting a ticket or paying for the car or doing whatever. I was more terrified of calling my mom. And then when I called her, the first thing that she did was say, well, why weren't you paying attention? And instead of, are you okay?
Right.
You know, but that's the thing. It's not that my mom didn't care, but it came across as every time I tried to open up, every time I tried to, it was always met with, okay, this is why it's not safe. This is why I don't share things. This is why it's better to just stay alone. And so I actually spent most of my childhood alone. And my sister was always quite a troublemaker. So my parents were always just like, oh, Rachel's fine. Like, Rachel's good. She's a smart girl. She's responsible. I was always the responsible child. So, you know, I couldn't mess up. And that was another thing, was that I always had to be so on top of everything, but I couldn't, you know? And so I
Perfectionism.
spent most, oh yeah, I was
Perfectionism.
definitely a perfectionist, but I wasn't a perfectionist in the sense that like I excelled at things. It was more so of, I would, but then I would get so overwhelmed that I would just like collapse, because I would go into such a spiral that I would never finish things. And so I was constantly letting my parents down, or, you know, they were disappointed in me or whatever it was. I did. I just felt like every time I tried to be heard, no one was listening. So I had a lot of anger as a child. I felt so lonely. And I think it was just such a profound loneliness. Um, but I also was terrified of people. So I was so terrified of connecting with people, even though I desperately wanted it, that I didn't.
So obviously, when one grows up and fearful avoidant patterns are now kind of cemented in us, plays out in our
Mhm.
relationships with friends, relationships with people we work with, but relationships where we're romantically involved. What does it feel like? What does it feel like from the inside to be struggling with a fearful avoidant pattern?
The best way I can describe it, not to be melodramatic, is that it feels like purgatory. I mean, I know a lot of people describe it as like a tug of war. It's like you want something, but it's also like something is like physically restraining you from getting it. Or it's like, I use a lot of metaphors.
Okay.
But like I kind of imagine it as you're on an island and you're screaming out for somebody, and you desperately want someone to come and save you. But in order to just get to the other island, you just have to swim in the ocean, but you're terrified to swim in the ocean, so it feels safer to stay in the island. But then it just goes back and forth. But that's kind of what it feels like.
So
did that answer your question?
well, and I think, you know, I'm not sure if there is an answer to the question. I think this is something that people who don't live with this challenge are trying to understand. So the only one that can probably explain it to the rest of the world is somebody that's lived it. In my thought process, I often wonder if it's somehow like drowning, but it feels unsafe to get out of the pool, to not drown, and it feels unsafe to stay in the pool, and somehow you're just feeling like you're drowning. Like that's what it seems like.
And exactly. But the thing is the drowning feels familiar, so you stay drowning, because also you don't know what it's like if you get out of the pool or out of the water. You don't know what's going to happen. But you also are afraid of what's going to happen if you don't try to keep swimming. But then it's also the drowning is so familiar that sometimes people just don't know any other way, because it's become an identity, because you've never actually learned to fully feel safe in your body. You don't know what it feels like. So if something does feel safe, you're like, what is this? And
Better
so
the
then
devil I know.
Exactly. You know, it's funny. My mom always says that. But no, exactly. That's exactly it. Your nervous system is always going to choose. It would rather choose certain anxiety and pain, because that's what fearful avoidants are wired to find familiar is disappointment. That feels more comfortable. That feels more predictable
Wow.
than uncertain peace and safety. So that's the thing, is like, I don't know what's on the other side of that door. So even though I'm in pain and I hate this, at least I know how to handle it. At least I can predict what's going to happen.
Did you know that something was off?
I knew. I always, to be honest, for a while, I always thought it was my circumstances, or I thought it was other people making me feel that way. And that's what a lot of fearful avoidants think. They think, oh, it must be like you're a mean person, that's why I feel like crap, you know? So rather than, I did start noticing a pattern as far as dating, but I always just assumed, oh, I'm so unlovable, no one ever chooses me, rather than I am clearly the common denominator here.
Right.
You know, I thought I was the common denominator, as in like, wow, I'm clearly meant to be alone, or like, wow, this is I'm the problem, which is, you know, it's fueled by a lot of shame and like I am the problem. But to be honest, I wasn't really aware of my avoidant patterns. I didn't really have language for it, as well as the avoidant strategies can actually be quite subtle and you don't even realize that you're doing it. So I always knew that I was incredibly anxious, but I really struggled to find a pattern until I actually had the language for it, or I had the understanding of it.
So what made you see it? What made you say, you know what, something's going on here and I need to address this? Did something happen in your life, or you read a book, you saw an Instagram video? What changed?
Yeah, so I always knew that I didn't want to be like my parents. I stayed away from relationships. So I was the chronic single person who was always like living my best life, not really doing anything. But every time I got into some sort of romantic relationship or something happened, it was always the same story over and over again. But
and what was the story? What was the story over and over again?
I was terrified of intimacy, and I was terrified of, you know, I mean, growing up, I learned that it was safer not to be close to someone, not to let someone in. So I always kind of skirted around, so that I would have so many crushes, so many obsessions of people, but I could never get into a relationship. And the thing is I always wanted to, and I was always like, oh man, like I just want to be in a relationship. But as soon as someone liked me back, my body would shut down and I would just ignore them. I literally, it was like a switch. And so as soon as there was any sort of reciprocity, I was terrified. And then I would just act really bizarrely. And so then they were like, okay, well, I guess she's not interested in me anymore. And so then they would move on. And then I would be really sad that they moved on. Why did they do that? And then I would be chasing the potential of, oh, we could have been so good. And then I would just move on to the next person. It was a pattern that would just repeated itself over and over and over again. And
so what were you actually wanting? If you weren't really wanting intimacy, but you weren't really wanting to be single, and you weren't, what were you wanting?
Oh, I was wanting intimacy. I desperately wanted that deep, meaningful partnership. That's the thing, is that I couldn't even make eye contact with people. It was so terrifying because that was exposing. I couldn't even handle someone knowing that I was attracted to them. Because as soon as that came up, I was like, I'm exposed. I'm so ashamed that they know this, that I have this desire. This is so vulnerable. I couldn't take it. So that's the thing, is I desperately wanted this thing, but I felt like I was constantly sabotaging myself, and I was ruining it for myself.
Sabotaging. What does that mean?
Yeah, so the thing is that self-sabotage is really self-protection. So the self-sabotage is really like, as soon as I got what I wanted, or as soon as I had any sort of sliver of what I wanted, aka someone just reciprocating feelings for me, my body immediately was like, this is so unsafe, we can't do this. The thing is I based it off of a feeling, and then my mind just made sense of it. And so then my thoughts justified it. And I was like, oh, it's not going to work. I don't like them anymore. Like, oh, this isn't, yeah, there's something wrong with the hair. Like, they're too short, or like whatever it is. Like, I would find like the most ridiculous reasons, but more so of, I was so terrified to be seen. And so I would just hide. I would just constantly hide. And so that's how it often would, quote unquote, sabotage myself, was that as soon as I got something, I was like, no, and then I would run.
So do individuals that are challenged with fearful avoidant, do they unconsciously cause the relationship to end?
Yeah, so what's really confusing is that they have this desire. And the thing is that fearful avoidants have such an immense capacity for connection. And actually, they make the best partners when they heal.
I've heard that fearful avoidants are the gold standard partners when they're walking in a healed place.
Yeah, it's true, because, it's funny though, because all the way that we were wired to make us so protective, it's like polarized. When you actually heal it, it creates such an incredible example of what an amazing partner is, because they are the deepest feelers of the attachment style. We feel so intensely.
So let's talk about the partners of fearful avoidance, because this has got to be crazy making for the people that love you.
Oh yeah, 100%. It's incredibly confusing. Not only is it confusing for the fearful avoidant, that's already immensely confusing, but it's obviously, if you don't understand what's going on, even if you do understand what's going on, it is so incredibly confusing. And, obviously it's very painful for people as well. I have so much compassion, and I have so much empathy for people with fearful avoidant attachment style. And I know that it's not, quote unquote, your fault, but we have to understand the intention doesn't always match the impact. And I know that I've had some incredibly unhealthy and harmful behaviors in my past as well. That's the thing, is that it really does impact people. And it's hard, because I work with clients all the time who are partners of fearful avoidance as well. And usually two things tend to happen. They either will overfunction, or they will pull back out of fear of pushing the fearful avoidant away. And so they try to match their energy, or they try to basically just not engage as much to to not appear desperate, but internally, obviously, they're very anxious.
Right.
Both of these, although they come from a place of your own activation, it's not serving anybody, because a lot of times we'll see that people will just be very patient with the fearful avoidant, especially when they start learning about their attachment style and think, oh, this poor person, they've been through so much trauma, like they just need to be loved. And I'm like, oh no, that's a slippery slope.
Why is it a slippery slope?
Well, first of all, if you are endlessly accommodating to someone, and so what ends up happening is that they think, oh, I just need to love them. If they know how much I love them, then they'll feel safe. I just need to make them feel safe. And it's like, well, first of all, you can't make someone feel safe. Second of all, you will very quickly step into an over-functioning role, which is already going to dysregulate your nervous system. But also what ends up happening is that you enable the behavior, and you enable it because it either feeds their avoidance of like, okay, they took space, they ghosted me for a month, but oh, they're back. Oh, let's just like take it one step at a time, no pressure, but nothing was addressed. People would be surprised by how aware and how ashamed fearful avoidants are of their behaviors, especially when they pull back. They do feel bad, because that's a big thing, is that they assume that they're going to be punished for taking space. Most of the time, fearful avoidants are aware of this. It's also, they're more ashamed of why they have to. There's like, it's all these different things, right? So it's like, I feel bad because I don't trust that I can show up the way that you need me to show up. And now I don't understand what's going on with me. All I know is that I can't show up in the way that you want me to show up. Because that's the thing, is that that's the kind of the level of awareness that people have, is that I don't know what's wrong, but I can't do this. Like, I can't sustain this, and I don't know what's going on. All I know is that this tends to happen, right? That's kind of as far as the language goes. There is a level of awareness. If I know that I pull back, I know that, I used to do that as well, where I would ghost people and I would feel so bad about it. And I would be like, oh my gosh, I'm such a terrible friend, or I'm such a terrible person that I saw a message, and then I heard it, and then I walked out the room because I was like, I can't do that right now. But then I would not message them back for a week, and I would see the message and I would see it. And so people always wonder, like, do they not see it? Yes, they do. I would see it, and then I just would avoid it, because it felt like such a big thing to enter back into a conversation or to reconnect with somebody. And then you add shame, and then it's just a question of if they are able to reconnect. And so that's why oftentimes it's so indirect. Like, they'll just send you a meme, or they'll send you something that's something unrelated, but it's just to get the conversation going again. But let's not address what happened.
What is all of this one? What's going on with emotions on the inside? Are they overfeeling them, underfeeling them? What do you feel?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the thing, is that fearful avoidants, like I said, are the deepest feelers of the attachment styles. We feel very intensely. But a lot of fearful avoidance, but we also learned that it wasn't safe to feel, and that our own body and our own internal world wasn't safe. So a lot of fearful avoidants will push down their emotions because they're terrified of being consumed by them. But, unlike a dismissive avoidant who can really push it down, a fearful avoidant feels too much. So it just either will explode, like it's this constant feeling it, because they do it. And it's also, the thing is, we feel so deeply, but we never learn to regulate our emotions. So I'm a crier. Like, I cry all the time, but that's also how my body processes emotion. But that's the thing, is like, there's so much happening internally. Some, they really try to keep it together because there's such a fear of being too much. And, a lot of fearful avoidants have a lot of shame around their reactivity or around their emotions, or they learned that it just wasn't safe to be witnessed with them. So it feels like you're just constantly like, it's right here. And the
What,
emotions are just always right here.
well, so I'm asking this question from a very somatic perspective. What does shame feel like? So I'm not asking what it seems like in our thought process. What does
Yeah.
shame feel like?
Yeah, so it's great that you ask somatically because shame is wired in the nervous system. So it is very much in our body. Shame, it can come out in different ways, right? So, like for me personally, whenever I felt shame, I felt such a heaviness in my chest and I would like collapse. Like I would just hide, like I was trying to become as small as possible because I didn't want to be perceived because I was
Okay.
just so ashamed. And then sometimes it comes out as anger and it comes out in like a fight response. And that's when you like push people away or you deflect or you don't take accountability. It just feels like this wave of, um, it feels like this wave of I need to protect myself. It feels like a heaviness in your chest. And I mean, of course, for different people, it might feel different ways. I mean, just speaking to my experience, it does. It feels like such a weight, like something is on your chest, but also it feels like your shoulders are incredibly tight. Like it's almost like it's your body is like crushing in to protect the core. So that's kind of what it's like. It feels like something became exposed here and it feels really raw and it feels really heavy. And it's almost like it feels like grief, but not quite. And it it feels like also there's like a tightness in the
In your
jaw.
jaw. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like it's literally like this area, it's just concaving.
From everything that you read, everything that you hear, everything that people say about people that come from a fearful avoidant background, wisdom would say just don't ever date a fearful avoidant. And I can understand why people perhaps would say that. So I want your thoughts on that one. And then the second half of that one is, what if you were and you're now in a long-term relationship or you are married to somebody who is a fearful avoidant pattern? What do you do?
The thing is that fearful avoidance really just need structure, they need consistency, they need, to be honest, sometimes it takes a relationship for them to realize that, oh, so this is what it could be like, or this is me, so I need to do something, right? So sometimes it can act as a catalyst, and
Change.
oftentimes it does.
One of the main characteristics of a fearful avoidant is what's called the fearful avoidant discard.
Yes,
So fearful avoidants can be very, very good at breaking up with you.
it's true. Oftentimes people will see it as a complete out of the blue whiplash, or it could be over something like you're having a disagreement, or there could be something where they thought that you were talking to somebody else when you were just asking for directions, and then they just break up with you saying, I can't do this, I can't do this anymore. Um and then sometimes it's because they've just deeply internalized things and you had no idea, everything seemed totally fine, and then one day they just went cold and they just completely switched. I've heard a lot of it like Jekyll and Hyde. I've heard a lot of people describe it that way, which
Mm.
I can see that. I can understand where that comes from. Yeah, so the discard is it's just a very abrupt. It's different from a breakup in the sense that a breakup is more so it's more thought out, more planned, more this has been happening over a period of time. But a discard is usually quite abrupt and a complete shock. It really depends on their own internal, like how they regulate, as well as, I mean, regardless, they're in like total survival mode. So they might have a brief moment of, oh, thank God the expectations are gone, the pressure is gone. Some fearful avoidance, they go straight into their avoidance side and they're like, peace out, I'm done. And then they're good for a couple of months. So that's kind of where that relief is coming from. But unlike dismissive avoidance, they still have such a drive for closeness. So they tend to oscillate very consistently between. And that's why you see such mixed signals after the breakup as well. Well, it makes sense though, right? Because if you're constantly activated, or if you are feeling overwhelmed, you don't know what to do, you're going back and forth. Do I love this person? Do I not love this? Is this what love feels like? And then when you have the distance, which is what an avoidant needs, and like autonomy, distance, reducing the overwhelm to regulate, then you're like, oh, relief. But then you start to regulate. And so then it's like, oh, now I have clarity on my decision. But, it oftentimes a fearful avoidant will very quickly be like, what have I done? What have I done? I did it again. I don't know why I keep doing it, right? That's the thing, is that they will switch to, because of the distance, they will be able to start getting clarity of like, this is what I actually really appreciated about that relationship. I actually felt safe. I do love them. What am I doing? And so then that's kind of the regret phase that they tend to go in. That's the thing, is that a fearful avoidant won't always come back though, even though they desperately want to, right?
Why?
Because they can regret it and they can really want to come back. But it's also a question of the shame that they're experiencing as well. Shame is a big reason why fearful avoidants don't come back. So yes, it's very confusing.
What is the healthiest steps for somebody that is maybe recognizing this pattern in themselves? I have to assume that awareness is probably overwhelming itself.
Awareness is very important. Of course, we can't change what we're not aware of. So understanding that, hey, this isn't who you are. This makes sense of why I am the way that I am. But then it will very quickly turn into big emotional, like, cathartic experience. There's a lot of grief, there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of fear, like, oh my gosh, now I know how broken I am. Like, I had to fix this all by myself. Like, how do I do it? Where do I begin? And so then it becomes a whole thing where it's so overwhelming that they just shut down, or they try to do everything at one time, and then they burn out.
Nobody can.
Yeah. Right. I mean, believe me, I tried that many times too. Something that fearful avoidants really struggle with is pacing. Fearful avoidant is very confusing, because one minute you think they're completely invested and it's great, or you think that they like you, but then you're just never sure because it's constantly going back and forth. But I mean, that happens in relationships as well. I mean, yeah.
Dismissive avoidants tend to be categorized or generalized as male. Fearful avoidants tend to be generalized as female, but that's not the case, is it?
A dismissive avoidant has that very stoic, like, it almost seems like a very steady, stoic, like, there's a wall here, you're not getting past it. There's like a mystery about it. And so a lot of people just assume that that's a man, but obviously there are dismissive avoidant women. But there's plenty of fearful avoidant men. I used to date one as well, and he was a lot more anxious than I was, which is also, a lot of people don't associate anxious attachment with men either.
Are fearful avoidants broken?
No. I know that many believe that they are. You are not broken. This is a very intelligent way of how you want to adapt. And it can be rewired. These are simply just learned patterns that you can reteach yourself. And it's hard when you have behaviors that are really harmful and you're really ashamed of them, or you keep repeating the same patterns and you just assume that, oh, it must be me, I must be the problem. It's also, that's the kind of narrative that keeps us stuck, because shame serves shame only. It doesn't help you. And that's what keeps a lot of people stuck from actually healing.
So it is something that can be addressed, grown, healed, fixed.
Yeah. I mean,
maybe,
otherwise,
sort of, kind of.
Yeah, I mean,
no,
how would we have secure partners, or like, how would we have secure people? But it's like, it's the same thing. I hear, avoidance will never change. Avoidance never heal. And if that were true, then addicts would never recover. If that was true, then people would never be able to change their perspective. And, it's the thing is that it does happen. It takes a willingness to do it, first of all. It takes an awareness, and it takes consistent effort. It's not easy, but it absolutely, you can heal. And, I will always have my fearful avoidant original wiring, right? So I still feel things, and I still have a very sensitive nervous system, but that's just how I was wired. That's how I was built, and that's okay. It's a very different experience when you're actually secure, because the whole point is I can feel something, but I don't need to act on it.
Or
I
be
can
overwhelmed.
feel a little, it's like I can feel overwhelmed in something, but I don't need to isolate for a week so I can regulate. I can regulate in the conversation, even if it's conflict. Or, hey, I'm feeling overwhelmed in conflict right now. I can stay enough where I can say, hey, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. Can we just take a few minutes so I can reset, and then we can come back, right? So that's the whole thing, is you have choice. And that's the beauty of it, is that when you're actually healing, you're a far more intentional partner, because you're so much more intentional with what you're feeling, with what you're doing, with what your experience is, and how that impacts another person. I mean, it's completely transformed the way that I am as a person, as a friend, as a daughter. It's changed how I associate with my parents.
How has it changed you practically?
First of all, I have a regulated nervous system, which completely is a different experience. That's the thing, is I can experience, I don't spiral anymore, which is a huge plus. The difference is I don't collapse, I don't shut down, I don't, I'm not perfect. Just like a secure person isn't perfect. Sometimes you're like, okay, I checked, I did something. That's okay. The point is that I'm able to stay with myself enough where my body regulates itself. I don't need to do a bunch of different things. My body knows that it's safe with me. So a lot of it is nervous system work.
Which means what?
What I do with my clients, for instance, my approach is a very gentle, sustainable way of healing. So the whole point is I want you to work with your highly protective system, right? So what it means is that we're not trying to get rid of the behaviors. We're simply creating the safety so that your strategies don't feel the need to keep protecting you, right? So that's the whole point, is that we're changing the role, we're changing the relationship that we have to them. So already that does something internally by changing the relationship that you have with your responses. So when I work with clients, I take them through a very simple step first, because it's a very sensitive, protective system. So when we add pressure, when we try to add expectation, shame is a big factor that keeps people stuck. So we start with very simple, no meaning making, which is first we need to understand what the hell is happening in your body, right? We need to understand that your body has signals and
notice.
Yeah, we need to be able to remove the pressure of what they mean, because we're trying to peel back the identity of what these responses are. So we first have to understand and differentiate between, is this nervous system activation? Is this because I had 3 cups of coffee without any food today? Or is this because my relationship is wrong? We need to be able to differentiate between what the signals are in your body and actually build a dialogue with it, so that when you have a signal, you actually notice it. So it doesn't escalate to something where you break up with your partner because you didn't notice. And it's also, you're able to say, okay, this is nervous system activation. This doesn't mean I'm actually in danger, right? So that's a fundamental aspect of it. But also a huge part is wanting to stay when you're connected. So a lot of the times we try to jump to, I need to do something about it. A big part of the fearful avoidance system, because it's a very complex system, so we have to teach it something very specific. And the whole thing is we need to stay connected when we're activated. So it's about building your tolerance to that and building your capacity. And when I say building your capacity, I mean your emotional capacity. First of all, we need to be able to complete our emotions. That's a huge thing. And also be able to expand your window of tolerance, right? So it's like we all have this window of tolerance, this range of what we can experience, like stress, emotions, closeness, without kicking us into a survival mode. Fearful avoidants have a much smaller window of tolerance than most people. Right. So that's why something so simple like the Wi-Fi not working can send you into a fight response. So it's all about expanding it very gently. And so a lot of it is we have to learn that, okay, I'm feeling something. I don't need to automatically react to it. I can take a pause. I can take a moment. I can not do anything, remove the pressure of, hey, I don't need to fix this right now. And then that like is a moment with that pause. Even if you end up doing the thing, it's okay. The point is that pause is building capacity. And it seems so simple, but that is something that is crucial for the nervous system to learn. And it's all about repetition.
And that's not just
kind
a
of like where we start.
Thing.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it's a huge thing for dismissive avoidance as well. Yeah. Like, first of all, like that's the whole thing is they need to learn that, hey, connection's not gonna like make you lose yourself.
Right.
And then anxious as well, like being able to sit with the discomfort of like, hey, like I'm feeling really anxious. I don't need to act on this right now. But that's a big thing, is being able to connect to yourself without going into survival mode. And so then, that's like kind of the foundation, and then building that internal safety. So creating safe experiences. That's the whole thing, is that the fearful avoidant never learned what safety actually really felt like. So you create those moments, right? So you can't wait for the external to provide that, because that's oftentimes what's happening. They're waiting for the external conditions, everything to be perfect, so then I can feel safe. But of course,
never perfect.
Right. So you create little micro moments. And so you do a practice. You just teach the body over and over and over and over again. I can't tell you how many times I did practices. Like, I mean, I would love to know the number. That's the whole point, is that you start with that. And then when you have enough safety, you can start trusting yourself. You can start actually trusting that, hey, like, I can handle this. I can do this. Or, I don't need to make the wrong choice or the right choice, because either way, I know I can handle it. But that's the thing, it's really hard to trust yourself when you don't feel safe with yourself. I took years to heal, but when I actually started doing the framework that I now teach my clients, I kid you not, within a few months, I noticed a difference.
Really?
And within a year, I was a different person. I mean, it was crazy. I was a completely different person. And I mean, within a year and a half, like night and day, completely different experience. I think that people have just always assumed that I could be this, but I just didn't see it myself. So
that is a pretty profound statement.
Yeah. I feel like my friends always loved me, and
they always saw your potential.
They always loved me. They never. I didn't have to heal for them to love me more, and then for them to change. Our relationship has deepened because I'm able to receive that love now, and because I'm able to meet them with more reciprocity. So it's a lot deeper relationship. Yeah, I mean, it hadn't changed beforehand, but now I'm actually able to really accept that love. And it's still uncomfortable, I'm not gonna lie, but really? I love it. I love it. I love how uncomfortable it is. I told myself this years ago as well. I was like, one day I'm gonna be so grateful that I did this. It sucks now, but I know that if I just keep going, it will be grateful. And I always knew when I was a kid as well, I was like, there's a reason why I'm in this experience. Right. And there's something I can do with this. I want to help people. I don't know what that looks like. And knew that I was different from my family for a reason. And when I say different, I was just more aware And I kind of took a step back and I was like, something's off here and something needs to change, but I don't have the power as a child to change it. So, yeah, I mean,
you are a generational breaker. You are breaking a generational pattern. Truly.
And it's a hefty role. And it's not easy. I know I'm so grateful every single day that I did the work, and because I've changed the rest of my life. I've changed, potentially my children, if I have children, and I also get to help people, and I get to change their lives. I get to help them, I should say, change their lives and potentially their relationships and their parenting and how everything else falls. And so, I mean, it's pretty profound, and I'm very, very grateful.
Rachel, thank you for being here tonight. I always try to find words to articulate to my guests of what I'm sensing. And as you're talking, just so you've heard this from somebody on the outside, I feel and sense somebody who's profoundly safe and kind. And I appreciate it and I notice it. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It has been my pleasure. And we are going to do this again. We're going to talk about some other things, but thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for holding the space for me to share this.
Thank you for joining us tonight on the Porch Club. Thank you for sitting on my back porch as we have a cup of coffee and talk about real things. And we look forward to you joining us next week. Please stick around as we talk about what's coming up next week. And we look forward to seeing you joining us again next Monday night, next week on the Porch Club. Good night.
Child keeps sabotaging your adult life. That's because they're still trying to survive your childhood. This younger part of you doesn't know that the danger is over. They're using the same protective strategies that kept you safe as a kid. People-pleasing, self-sabotage, emotional shutdown. Because to them, you're still in the same home where those strategies were necessary for survival. You push away good relationships because your inner child learned that closeness equals pain. You self-sabotage success because that younger part of you learned that being seen equals danger. You people please until you're exhausted because your inner child learned that saying no meant abandonment and rejection. These aren't character flaws. These are survival strategies a child developed that your adult self is still running. Your inner child doesn't know you're safe now. To them, you're still living with a parent who hurt you. They're operating from a nervous system stuck in childhood danger, making adult decisions from child-level fear. When you feel triggered, that's because that younger part of you still thinks that the threat is happening right now. They need you to tell them that the danger is over. The strategies your inner child developed saved you then, but they're destroying you now. Making yourself small saved you from your parents' rage, but now they're keeping you from your dreams. Emotional shutdown protected you from overwhelming feelings, but now it's stopping you from making real connections. Your inner child is still protecting you from dangers that no longer exist. You have to update that frozen part of you to the present moment. Thank them for keeping you alive and gently show them, prove to them that you're an adult now with resources, choices, and powers and skills that they didn't have. You can protect them. They don't have to protect you anymore.